computer. And we'll send you the recording and the, we can send you the recording right away if you want. And we can send the transcript once that's completed and give you a chance to make edits, and before we do anything with it. And we actually honestly don't know yet what we might do with it, but we'll get we'll ask your permission for anything that we do. So if you have the opportunity to say no.
Yeah. Oh, terrific.
And yeah. There might, it might be that we would include like audio clips, possibly video clips on the website for the exhibition, text quotations, but any of that will, come back to you first for your permission. And I'm going to change the view so that it's a speaker view. And Chantel is doing this series of oral history interviews as part of the research that's kind of going on around the exhibition. And the exhibition originally was entitled Love is Universal, and it's now called Emergence. So it's Emergence, Black queer intersections at the center. It's focusing on artists who were in one way or another affiliated with the Southside Community Art Center. And a lot of the focus is on earlier 20th century, like 1940s, 50s, 60s, in large part because the sort of queer presence at the center hasn't been excavated for those years. And we're, kind of trying to bring out some of that history. And it's something that came up as an opportunity. So I'm on the board of the center, and I'm the chair of the Archives and Collections Committee for the board. And just like over the years, kind of looking through the archives, have come across these sort of like bits and pieces that have to do with the queer history of the center, and kind of always wanted to think about like how that could be made more manifest. And we have two great curators now on staff at the center. One is Zakia Najiba, who's the public engagement manager, and the other is Lamar Gales, who's the collections manager. And they're both interested in taking this on as a curatorial project. So they're the curators. I'm kind of an advisor. But because I'm also a Northwestern professor and Chantel is a Northwestern student, that's sort of the connection to kind of bringing her on as an intern with the project. And she's been doing really great work too. So she's going to ask most of the questions, but because many of the other people she's interviewing are people I already know and have spoken to, and I had never spoken with you, and was really excited to get to meet you. I wanted to sit in on this one, and so Chantel's going to ask the questions, but I might, at some point I might jump in with something, but I'll try to be pretty quiet, and I'll let her take it away.
Well, that's pretty amazing. I want to thank you, Chantel, for diving into this and bringing all this to light, because it has been so long in the shadows. It was, Black queer art didn't even exist. I mean, it certainly did actually exist, but it was never spoken about. It was never focused on. It was, bypassed. So this is an amazing thing you're doing. Thank you.
It's been so wonderful. I just did my first interview a couple weeks ago now, and that was so great. And especially not being like from the area myself, it's definitely like a history that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to get otherwise. All right. Professor Zorach kind of covered the majority of the like basic things to get out of the way. So I guess I'll just start with kind of a pretty easy question of like, where were you from? Where did you grow up? Are you originally from Chicago, and all of that kind of thing?
Oh, okay. Yes, I grew up in Chicago. I was born and raised there on the South Side. By the time I found out about the Southside Community Art Center, I was actually living on the north side of Chicago because that's where all the queer people lived. So it was kind of eye-opening to then go back and visit and see these, the art space there and the people involved in arts and stuff like that I had no idea existed when I was growing up. Certainly we went to the museums and stuff like that, but we went to the DuSable Museum, which was probably the only Black arts institution I'd ever even heard of before the Southside Community Art Center. So it was pretty amazing. It was exciting at that time to get to meet Margaret Burroughs and some of the other staff there and to see what they were doing. I went there with my partner, Stephanie Coleman. We had begun the Wholesome Rock Gallery in the mid 80s. And so we were looking around to see, how does this work? What are other people doing? What works, trying to get tips and see, because we were new at this. We just had the idea. And so we opened the doors and said, okay, let's show some art. And so they were very helpful actually, and, showing us everything they knew and everything they'd been doing. But on the other hand, we also did not at all mention that we were queer, because we were visiting this Black community, and for the Black community, that was always a hidden aspect of who you were. So first and foremost, we were artists, then we were women artists, and then after that, it was not a topic of discussion.
Mm. And what initially got you into art in general, particularly? I know you work with visual arts and magazines and that type of thing and graphic design. So what got you into that?
That's a good question. I think I've always been interested in creative arts, in finding ways to express myself, in just the joy in using the different materials and things like that. I certainly took classes, in art in high school, and commercial art and design and 3D art and stuff like that later on, bits and pieces in colleges and universities. And then after a while, I just discovered, this was a great way to express who I was and to be able to share that with a wider audience.
Sorry, finishing up the note.
So yeah, I didn't really have a formal arts education, beyond high school, which wasn't formal. It was just, art classes. So it was kind of, just a sideline that then became, really important to me.
Where did you go to high school? Sorry.
I went to Whitney Young
Chantel was already
Magnet
going to
High
ask.
School.
Where is that? Sorry.
I went to Whitney Young Magnet High School. And so that was a very creative atmosphere. I mean, there was Maggie Brown was there at the same time I was, Santita Jackson, just, loads of theater folks. Terrence Franklin was there. So many different names and folks. Of course, Michelle Obama was there. And I'm trying to think of the network TV guy. Allison Keyes was there. At any rate, it was a great atmosphere for, theater and arts and exploring. They allowed you that freedom to choose your field of study, choose your classes. So we were we were cherry picked and very dedicated to whatever it was we were studying: arts, English, math, science, computer science, dance. So it was just a really neat place to be.
It definitely sounds like it. We have a similar type of school, I think, back where I'm from, that has a similar kind of ethic to it. And I know you had mentioned the Wholesome Rock Gallery. How did you kind of get involved with that, and how did that come about?
Because I'd been creating work for a while, I, started accumulating work. I had begun work on a series of portraits. There were 21 portraits I'd created. And I started going around the galleries to find out if people would exhibit them. And everyone was like, no, we don't know you. Where are you from? We've never seen you. We don't care about this work. It's, they wouldn't even give you the time of day. This was, the galleries around the Loop, in the South Loop, any of the large name galleries. And it became very clear that this was pretty much a closed circuit. It was like, you didn't, if you hadn't been to the Art Institute, if you didn't have someone working actively on your behalf, if you didn't have the contacts, they really weren't interested in showing your work. And I realized, I mean, I'm working a 9-to-5 job. All these galleries are only open 9-to-5 or 10-to-4 or something like that. And it was very sales oriented. It was, you know, you go in, it's like, what are you interested in? What do you want to buy? What can we show you? And I thought, well, that's kind of not why I'm creating art. It's like I was in it for the more community aspect, the, you know, learning something, teaching other people things, stuff like that. And I thought, well, I can't be the only one having this experience. There's probably lots and lots of other artists out there going through the same thing. And, you know, yes, I was young and enthusiastic, but, you know, you are right out of school. So it's like, okay, what, you know, how can I do something that'll promote my work and help other artists? And so I came up with the idea of opening the gallery. When I met Stephanie, she said, well, what are you waiting for? And I said, well, you know, I need funding and sponsors and blah, blah, blah. And I need this much space and all this stuff. And she's like, no, you don't really need that. You know, you've got the idea, just start where you are and that stuff will come. And so I was like, oh, it was something, you know, I just never had anyone encourage me like that to say, you have everything you need, just go for it. And so we did. We opened the gallery, which was open after hours so that people that work could come and see art. And it was a comfortable space with couches and chairs so you could actually hang out. We served coffee and snacks and stuff like that so that you could actually be with the art, meet other people, have conversations, and yeah, kind of what today's coffee houses do in a limited way. This was kind of before coffee houses, even though the idea of a coffee house has been around since forever, since the ancient Greeks. It's, you know, a place where you go and exchange ideas and, you know, listen and laugh and learn and stuff like that. So it was kind of recreating that, only with art included. And it was amazingly successful. Like, people were showing up from, you know, Northwestern University, because that was right down the road from us. You know, just people, other artists, obviously. And we ended up with like a 6-month-long waiting list for people to display their work, because we would also not turn anyone away. If you showed up and you said, I've got this artwork, can I display it? We'd say, yeah, because that's one of the big steps to take, is to be ready to show your work. Who am I to say, no, you're not ready, or no, I don't like this? That was like another big learning thing, is because I liked work didn't mean everybody would like it. Lots of work that I didn't care for, other people did like it. And it was like, wow, how about that?
Very cool.
So yeah, we had a ton of fun. The gallery was open from 7 in the evening to midnight, every night of the week, I believe, except for Sunday. And so I would work my 9-to-5 job, and then I'd go home and change, or, you know, chill out for an hour, and then open the gallery.
And I'm trying to think of how to word this. It sounds like your heart was like definitely into this. So did it necessarily feel like work after going to like your kind of more standard job, or did it feel like a form of recreation, even though it was technically work? And also, where was the gallery? I know you'd mentioned it was right down the street from Northwestern.
Yeah. It you're right. It did not feel like work. It felt like, you know, socializing and having fun. You know, it's like Stephanie took care of the books, so I'm sure that part was more work oriented, and I got to be the social director, you know, curator, art installer, stuff like that. You know, we published a little newsletter every month that had, you know, a list of events and things like that we'd be doing. The gallery was located on Clybourne Avenue, and it was still pretty much an industrial area then. So we were on the second floor of this office building. It probably used to be an office building like in the 50s or the 60s. And on the first floor was a theater. I've forgotten the name of the theater now. And down the street from us, about 4 doors down, there was another gallery that was like a very high-end gallery that a sculptor had opened. He'd purchased that building, and so he did his work, and then they also had a little display area. But they were not at all like we were. They were a commercial gallery. I can't imagine. I never saw anybody there like to go in and see people looking at art or anything like that. But they became interested in what we were doing, and so they'd stay late and drop by and buy stuff and hang out. So it was a really new idea and a new area also. I mean, this is the arts gentrifying industrial neighborhood. So yeah, we were right off of Fullerton Avenue on Clybourne. So you've got the Fullerton train stop that was right there, so people could commute and walk down, or take the bus down rather. It wasn't that close to walk. So yeah.
And it's my understanding that it's closed now. When about, if you remember, did it open, and then when did it close?
Wow, it felt like forever, but you know what? It was such a small blip in time. It was open from 1986, and then we closed in 1991. And we closed because the neighborhood started gentrifying, and other shops and artists and all kinds of stuff started happening in that area. And our landlord decided to raise the rent. And we thought, well, that's crazy. We made this space what it is. We're not paying $700 a month. Or, which now looks very reasonable. But at that point we were like, we've been paying $350. We're not blah, blah, blah. So we thought, well, we'll find another place and open it somewhere else. And it never was the same after that, because, neighborhoods are different. We ended up moving the gallery further northwest, near Ashland and Division, I believe. And, it was a totally different neighborhood. That's not what they needed. They didn't need arts. They probably needed a community center or something like that, so that youth had something to do. And then we eventually closed because it just wasn't the same.
And I know you had mentioned when you first brought up the gallery of like the idea of not wanting to just have a gallery so you can sell things. So kind of like going with that, like what does kind of both like your art mean to you, and like what, I know you mentioned like self-expression and all of that, but if you could like expand upon that, and like what kind of the work of other people generally, if that makes sense.
So let's see, where should I start? I did display my work, and I priced my work really affordably. That was like one of my other beliefs, is that average people should be able to afford artwork. Like, artwork shouldn't be so extravagantly expensive that, your best friend couldn't afford to buy it. So yeah, I'm talking like $60, $70. I'm like, oh, sure. I'd sell my art really cheaply. And I'd encourage other people to accept the minimum amount that a person was willing to pay if they really wanted to sell their work and have other people enjoy it and own it. And so we offered an auction system, so people could make an offer, on a piece of artwork, and it was a private auction. So they could put a little slip of paper in a box that would say, I'm interested in this piece, and this is how much I'd be willing to pay, stuff like that. But that brought up something really interesting, in that people in general don't know how to price artwork. They don't know what it's worth. They don't want to insult the artist either. It's like, you can look at a piece you really love and think, oh my God, this has got to be worth thousands of dollars. You know, I don't want to say, oh, I can only pay you $100 because they're afraid that that's an insult. But I think on the other hand, for the artist, it's so valuable. It's such a meaningful experience when you sell a piece of work that somebody else appreciated enough to want to give you money for it, and they're going to hang it in their house, and that they love it as much as you loved it when you created it. That feeling is immeasurable, you know? So I would encourage folks to, you know, to barter, to, you know, unless they really didn't want to sell the work, to price it at you know, a reasonable rate so that people would feel like they could actually afford it and purchase it. And so I sold a lot of work. Other artists sold, you know, quite a bit of work. So it was really more than we ever expected.
Very cool. And I know you'd mentioned that, or it seems like it was kind of like everybody, like the everyday person's kind of art gallery, for lack of a better term, you know, that with the hours and the affordability and all of that. So if you can remember, like, do you remember there being like a queer presence and just like a variety of people that came in, or was there any like specific kind of audience, for lack of a better term, that like you noticed was gravitated towards the gallery?
Yeah. You know, the other day I saw this great little meme that said, be as authentically you as possible so that everybody else feels that they can also be whoever they are. And I thought that's just perfect. It's like, it's hard to imagine that people are trying not to be who they are, but it seemed like because we were being exactly who we were approachable, and, you know, we didn't hide our sexuality, but we also didn't like go out and trumpet it and say, hey, we're lesbians and we only like other lesbians and only lesbians can exhibit here and like that. We were just being, you know, hey, we're artists, we like artists, we're smart, we like smart people. If you like art, come on over and let's hang out and look at art. We'd have poetry readings. So I think being approachable and authentic, we tended to attract other people who had similar interests and tastes, and also other people who were also outcasts, because we were kind of also those same outcasts. That here we could provide space for people who didn't necessarily feel comfortable in other spaces. Certainly in commercial art galleries, you wouldn't find that kind of comforting atmosphere or welcoming atmosphere. Even in museums, even in coffee houses, you know, so that gays and lesbians did come and hang out, as well as, you know, Blacks, Latinos, you know, whites. It was just a very diverse atmosphere where I think everyone was able to be authentically who they were, and we all got along. Everybody found that they had something they could contribute, whether it was music. People would come up with ideas. They'd say, oh, hey, have you ever thought about doing a group jam session or something? We'd be like, you want to do that? Cool. Come by on Wednesdays. We'll do the group jam session. Or if they just wanted to talk, people would be like, hey, yeah, I'm bummed out. Has anybody ever had relationship stuff that's not working right? And we'd be like, yeah, we all have. Let's talk about it. We just sit around, and it wasn't formal. We're not counselors or anything like that, but just being able to provide people with that space to express themselves seemed to make a difference, you know, like that's a lot all of us really want, is to be heard and to be seen, you know, and to be loved. So to be able to provide that to the community it wasn't work, you know, it was like, this is community functioning as it should. So yeah, it was kind of interesting to close the gallery space because when we did, at that point in time, Starbucks and places like that were starting to become more prevalent. And there were other little gallery spaces that had also opened up. And so it seemed like, oh, it's okay that we're closing because there are these alternatives and people can go there instead. But it's not the same at all. You can't go in Starbucks and find your community. So it was very interesting that I had this idea that, okay, we've paved this part of the road and now other people are going to come in and it's going to turn into this huge, byway that is heavily populated, and this is going to make everything better from now on, the end.
Mm. And thinking about like community, like even after the gallery had closed, like it definitely seems to be like important to you and important like for you to foster. Like what has community kind of like meant for you? Like has there been excuse me, like places or spaces outside of the gallery or within the gallery as well, that have served as like both community for you, but also places where you've like continued to foster it and encourage it, and what has that kind of like looked like?
Well, let's see. Right now I'm living in Florida, and I'm here because my parents retired here, and then my father had a stroke, and I decided to move here to become closer to them. And then the pandemic started, so I've kind of been separated from community in a way that I never was before. So I can't speak to any place here that's like that at all. There are meetups, which seems to be the current way that people seem to find community. It's like, oh, well, I'm interested in this, this, and this. And meetup says, well, these other people are interested in that same thing too. So there is that option, and it seems like it pretty much works. After Chicago, I moved to North Carolina because, well, for one, I couldn't afford property I discovered in Chicago. It was just, unaffordable to live in the areas where I wanted to live, like where the gallery was or in that area. And I thought for, $275,000, I should have like massive amounts of land and space, and not just a tiny, 900 square foot loft in, the River Arts District or something. So at any rate, and we were also looking at how to be sustainable, like farming, growing your own food, stuff like that. So we looked around for 3 years at different communities. And that was kind of eye-opening because we discovered that there are these little communities everywhere. You can go to Oklahoma, you can go to Texas, you can go to Michigan, you can go to Indiana and find some similar arts-oriented community that, is either supporting a gallery or a bookshop or something similar that creates that sort of community where people feel comfortable coming and shopping or hanging out or displaying work or doing readings and things like that. And it's just a matter of which community you feel most comfortable with. When we settled on North Carolina, it wasn't so much that there was a community there, but there was certainly land there that we could afford. And community seemed close enough. We were just outside of Asheville, which has a pretty creative, self-reliant kind of community. And so I was there for maybe 15 years and got to know the community there and started participating in different organizations, which I'm still participating with, actually. I really miss them. They're the sweetest people ever, you know. When you get to know people that work with the land or who are close to the land, they really rely on each other, and they rely on community in a way that people in the city don't necessarily. Like, you know your neighbors, you know your neighbors' kids, you know their dogs' names, you know, nobody locked their doors. You know, one of the most amazing things to me was going to visit a neighbor once and knocking on their door, and they just said, "Come in." And I was like, "Oh, you're not going to come let me in. You're just like, you don't even know who it is. You're just like, yeah, hey, come on in. We're in here." And yeah, it was just totally welcoming in a surprising way. There, people were not as concerned with who you are, with your sexuality or your race, or whether you're married or Christian or Baptist, for the most part. Um, as long as you were a good person and you minded your own business. It's like, if you're not like poking around and being judgy and telling other people what to do, they're like, "Hey, you're all right with me." And it was kind of mind blowing. It wasn't what I was expecting from a rural population. So that taught me a lot about community and what works, and how people can be better than you'd expect.
Yeah, I definitely get that. My grandmother's from South Carolina, and
Mm,
she like leaves her door unlocked still, even though we live in like a small city, and my dad's constantly like scolding her, like, "Lee, somebody's gonna break
mhm.
into your house. You can't do that." And she's like, "I'm going back to the South. I can't do this anymore. Nobody knows each other's names. They don't do
Yes.
anything." So it's definitely
Mhm.
a very different kind of space to be in.
Mhm.
And then after North Carolina, did you return to Chicago, or did you go from North Carolina to Florida?
Yes, from North Carolina, then I came to Florida. So
Okay.
that's where I am currently. And my current partner is an artist. I'm an artist still too. I mean, that was also part of the discussion was, while I was in North Carolina, my art became things that help the farm function and things that I could contribute to other groups and organizations. And it was interesting. In rural communities, craft is more popular, like your mug, for instance, Rebecca. You know, it's like there's lots of, yeah, pottery makers and folks like that. And there's less, you know, there's no experimental art. There's, you know, very little contemporary art, stuff like that. It's all about function. You know, it's like, can I use this thing? Will this thing add to my life? You know, will this thing help me in my daily chores? So, you know, lots of baskets and stuff like that. So I stopped, while I was living in North Carolina, creating art that you could buy and sell and stuff like that. Now that I'm back here in Florida, well, it's turned back around again. So now I'm creating kites, and my partner creates like there's a term for it, but now I've forgotten. Anyway, it's abstract works, and so we've been getting involved with some local galleries and looking at exhibiting work and stuff like that again. And it's very cool. I mean, it's wonderful to be involved with an arts community again, and to take a look at the things they're doing, and what works and what doesn't work. And, you know, it's kind of funny that everybody is examining the same things we did when we owned the gallery, you know, price points, allowing people to make offers on artwork, you know, stuff like that. It's kind of interesting that the art world as far as galleries and sales, is pretty much the same as it's always been. I guess the one difference would be that now they're more open as far as themes go, so that it's more targeted. Well, I suppose that's just our culture becoming more comfortable with talking about themes and bringing up different topics that before were considered, taboo or off-putting or things like that. So whereas in the 70s and 80s, you just have a show that was just like, contemporary work, but now you'll have a show that's like contemporary sexuality and art and, diverse populations. So it's kind of very interesting to see that shift and that movement where we are allowed now to express those parts of ourselves or to include those themes in definitions of our work.
I know you had mentioned or have kind of brought up, I feel like that's my key phrase. I know you had mentioned it being a little bit different in the 70s and 80s, and that you couldn't necessarily be as kind of like openly out and queer and that type of thing. Were there any, I'm trying to think of how to word this, ways within your own work, or did you see in like the works of other people's that they kind of queer coded things without kind of explicitly saying it? So like if you knew, you knew, but if you didn't, you didn't. And that type of thing, and just like expanding on what it was like to be queer at the time. We had mentioned like the South Side and being in the North Side because that was where all of the queer people were, and so kind of what was that whole experience like at that time?
I mean, I can probably count on one hand the number of queer Black artists that I knew, and a lot of them I didn't even know they were queer until years and years later, because I don't know, it was just a secret. It was just easier to pass than it was to try and deal with isms, so that you just wouldn't mention it. It's like if you were trying to forward your work or forward your career, you certainly didn't bring up your sexuality. Whereas now you can. Now it can be the foundation of your work. It can be, more fully examined. In the early 80s, I think a lot of us had works where our sexuality may have come through, but there was also a lot of work around feminism at that point. So that was kind of the strong carrying topic at that time. So you had like the Sister Serpents, and you had all these women doing, reclaiming their power and their energy. So you could easily identify that kind of work, and whether it was gay or not was kind of like, I don't know, either you knew that person personally and you knew they were gay, or you didn't at all. And, you could maybe suppose or imagine, but I think a lot of us were that way. We kind of, it's interesting that you said like had little hidden stories within our work, So like for my work, I really gravitated towards doing these portraits of like strong women. So I did, portraits of Tracy Chapman and Audre Lorde and Rebecca Walker, and, beautiful supermodels, Naomi Campbell, and Winnie Mandela, and folks like that. And for me, I could certainly see my attraction to these women as, homoerotic. Not that they were erotic images at all. They were just strong women. But it fit in with promoting the idea of women as strong, superior beings, while also being pleasing for me in a way that acknowledged my homosexuality. Now, I'm not saying that any of those women that I was portraying were homosexuals. That was also an unknown. It was just, people being people, people being who they were. So it's interesting looking back on it now and seeing how that was the only way I could express myself as a sexual being, was just by painting women.
And I'm blanking. 2 seconds. Thinking about your portraits and diving into like your work, I know that you had a publication like Planet Rock. Do you mind telling me a little bit more about that? What it was, how you got involved, what that was like, what you made, all of the kind of details.
Yes, well, because my day job was in advertising, I had access to, all of this cool equipment where we could photograph things, duplicate things, reproduce things. And I thought, this would be an easy, as any kind of community organization knows, you kind of have to spread the word in every way you can. And so we're like, well, it would be great to have something that hand out to folks where you've got, this is our current show, these are the shows coming up, here's a neat article we found, or somebody wrote something, they want to promote it. So I thought, well, let's do a newsletter. This was also at the beginning of the whole Kinko's revolution. Like, everybody had a newsletter or a zine suddenly, because you had access to these capabilities to reproduce things like cheaply and easily. And it was, commercial art, which I love, for me goes hand in hand with fine art. So it was just an easy jump to say, oh, we're going to put out a little monthly zine that promotes the gallery, promotes local artists, and, is something that we can use to further our goal of pulling people in, letting people know what we're doing and stuff like that. And that was a fun little thing. It was just a little black and white Xerox deal that, I think Stephanie Coleman still has. She's our archivist, so she's got copies of every single issue stored somewhere in her storage unit. And it was a fun thing to do, to be able to include our current calendar of events and stuff like that. That also came about, I think, because we were introduced to international mail art, which was a whole circuit I had no idea even existed. So you would get a mailing list, or you'd apply to, or you'd submit to a mail art exhibition. And I'm not sure who originally told me about the first one, but they were like, hey, there's this guy in Italy and he's doing this mail art exhibition on, life and love. And you just, and the rules are, as long as you can mail it, they'll include it in their catalog of works. And what you get in return is a mailing list of everybody who sent something, and maybe a little picture of whatever it was that they sent. And from that mailing list, you can then contact all those artists and say, hey, I want to do an international mail art exhibit on, pick a theme. And so we did. And we did one probably quarterly, at least, I'm thinking. And people would send work from all over the world. And that was just amazing to me that, making the mail exciting is just really fun to open your mailbox and see, you've got these cool stamps from Germany. You've got, people that have rubber stamped the outsides of envelopes with all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, people, there are artists everywhere, and that they had created this whole network and this ability to share work, was something that we could then include in the newsletter also. So we could say, the newsletter also became our connection to this international mail art community. So we could include our call for entries. We could include pictures of entries that other people had sent us, and then mail that out. And then that would get passed around. So then it builds our international mail art community, as well as gives us more cool stuff to show in the newsletter.
It's like early net art, like network.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, this is the same time period where you've got your graffiti artists that are out doing, big wall things and, creeping around at midnight, tagging walls and stuff like that. And, they're also using Xeroxing and templates and that kind of thing. So it was just part of this whole movement of using public spaces to get your point across, to share your ideas and your creativity and your art. I suppose now that that's the computer, or that now that's TikTok or whatever's after TikTok. I'm not young enough to know, like, what else is there?
That's super cool. I had no clue about like international mail art, and I saw Rebecca's face light up. I was like, I think that might be my age showing right now. Let me not. Just let her explain.
Well, yeah, I actually my partner was involved in a film. What was it called? A film about mail art. And I actually ended up even meeting a mail artist in San Francisco. I forget his name. But yeah, I think it's just really interesting to think about like how people did networking in artistic ways before the internet, or before like the consumer internet, because like it existed, but in this more limited way. So that just that idea of like networking through paper that you're sending through the mail, and creatively, I love it. I mean, I think it's really great. Yeah, and I guess maybe I can just ask a question about because you were also involved in Think Inc. and Thing, or was it? Or yeah, could you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah. Well, Robert Ford was, a Black gay man, and I met Robert through the gallery. So, I think it was probably Trenton Adkins who came to the gallery and liked what we were doing, and he just became one of the regular guys. And eventually we were like, hey, you can come and help us out whenever you want. We can pay you a little, we can trade with you or barter with you or something like that. And he introduced us to Robert, and then from there it was like this perfect partnership. It was like he was interested in literary arts and promoting the whole gay scene, and we were like, hey, and he's on the north side, he's Black. Trenton, Robert, Larry Warren, they kind of became like we had like, you have a work husband, they were kind of like our play husbands. And yeah, they were just really fun partners. So they, we'd do as much together as we could. We'd do, fashion shows or parties or events. I'd give Robert a hand with layout and design for Think Inc. and Thing Magazine. We'd share art with him. He'd use the art in the publication. It was, just a fun, amazing time. They introduced us, obviously, to even more and more people, because then you've got DJs, you've got fashion people, fashion designers, drag kings and drag queens. It was just this whole new universe that opened up that we were like, we didn't even know any of that existed. I mean, certainly we just weren't involved. Certainly it existed. We just had no idea it was there. It was like this whole new underground world that we were like, oh yeah, come do some of that underground stuff over here. It's like, we have room. We'd love for you to do that. There was I can't think of his name now, the guy that would channel Billie Holiday. Like, he'd get dressed up in drag. Joey Arias. Joey Aria or Arias. Just amazing. Just this whole amazing group of talented young gay guys, and that they were also seeking an outlet, that they had been marginalized by every community, the fashion community, the music community, the drag community. Certainly there's always been a gay community, but they were in the margins. They were, these guys were just sexualized as, fetish objects and stuff like that. And it's like, no, we're more than that. We're the creators. Now, we're discovering that now everything originated with Black gay guys. They came up with the cool language. They came up with the fun looks. They came up with the amazing hairstyles and the dance moves and just kind of you name it. So it was just an amazing discovery and time to be alive and partnership. So and again, it was all just a little blip in time. Think Inc., I think, published maybe 3 editions, and Thing magazine was probably 3 to 4 years, maybe max, maybe not even that. That exhibit's currently on display at the Art Institute now. And along with a bunch of other zines, because once again, this is just a small part of a bigger movement when people discovered they could publish their own magazine or zine that expressed who they were and what they liked and what they thought. They could write their own articles and stuff like that, just like the big magazines did, and have their, very own specialized audience or target themes and topics that were of importance to them. So yeah, I'm so happy that I was able to meet Robert and that whole crew, because yeah, they added a whole new dimension to everything we were doing, and validified the need for community, for us all to come together and share our ideas and concepts. It's like you can do more with a group than you can all on your own.
Did she go to slow? Yeah, it's definitely crazy how you like meet certain people and it's just like one person and you end up like exposed to whole new worlds that you never really knew of or would have known of had you not met those people. Completely blanking. Rebecca, did you have any other questions?
I have a few that are just kind of like, maybe they're just like little questions. What did you ever show work at the Southside Community Art Center, or what was your sort of experience of the center when you did encounter it?
Yeah, no, I never did. I don't know if it's because they never did calls for entries, or if I was just wrapped up in the gallery and just never got back to the South Side. Years later, after the gallery closed, I did start working with a group of African-American artists, Sapphire and Crystals, that was led by Marva Jolly. And that was probably as close as we got to the Southside Community Art Center. I do remember we had an exhibit somewhere on the South Side, but now I don't remember where that space was. But we did do like traveling exhibits, you know, just this group of about probably 20 African-American women, all working in different styles. But we thought, hey, you know, it's easier to promote ourselves and to get a show as a larger group than as one African-American woman approaching a gallery.
Yeah, I know that group well, or you know, I've known different manifestations of it. I didn't realize that you were part of it. When was that? When were you involved?
Gee, well, it was the early to mid 90s, I think. Yeah.
That's great to know. I had a few questions just about people and whether you knew them or knew anything, you know, had any experience with them. One is Ralph Arnold. Okay.
No.
Marguerite Horberg.
Yes. Of the Hat House. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just thought of her as you were talking about this sort of loft culture, because I think she had a loft somewhere like on the near West Side at some point, which was like,
that's right.
Yeah.
She had several different spaces, and I actually did exhibit some of my work in her space on Milwaukee Avenue.
Okay.
And yeah, what she was doing was equally amazing. I mean, she decided she wanted to provide a space for, you know, international music, Afro-Cuban music, stuff that nobody else was promoting or allowing space for. And same deal, she was immediately, you know, successful at that. Like, people would show up and cram her little lofts just to, you know, be in that space and be part of that community.
And then I wondered, this is like not really that related to the conversation, but whether when you were in North Carolina, did you ever run across Ann Zelli?
That name doesn't sound familiar now.
She was from Illinois, and she spent some time on the west side of Chicago. She actually worked for the MCA, helping to run an art gallery that was like a collaboration with the Vice Lords, the conservative Vice Lords, the Street Gang.
Wow.
And she ended up in Brevard, North Carolina.
Okay. Yeah.
Probably a little further from Asheville than you were.
But yeah, I'm familiar with Brevard.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. But yes. Oh, and I also wanted to be sure we had, if you don't mind, your date of birth.
Oh, sure. 1962, July 14th, 1962.
Okay. Bastille Day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chantel, did you have any closing questions?
I think that was all I had, honestly. But also being mindful of your time, because I know it's been right around an hour, pretty much on the dot.
Yeah. This has been a really inspiring conversation. I really, like, I almost was brought to tears at one or two points. It's just really, really nice to hear you speaking about community and inclusiveness and just all the things that all the projects that you've been involved in. Just really, it's really exciting.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I'm really excited to hear more about this exhibition. So please keep me posted and let me know, you know, how, when, where, what else I can do to help. If you want to, you know, I'm still in touch with some folks in Chicago, but if there's anyone else that you want to reach out to, or any, you know, anything like that, anything at all, whatever you know, need a hand with, I'm excited to see where this goes.
Great. Is there anyone you would recommend we speak with?
Well, yeah, there's and you guys are in Chicago. Do you know Yvonne Welbin?
Oh yeah.
She is in the process of creating a community center on the south side of Chicago, somewhere around 71st and not Jeffrey Yates, somewhere near the train tracks there. She's purchased an old building. that they're trying to renovate. She also manages Sisters in Cinema, which is the Black women film website. So she does a lot with, Black women in film, obviously, Black women artists, stuff like that. But she would probably be a really good local contact. She may be, actually, I'm not sure if she's in New York now or in Chicago, but she certainly keeps in touch with the community and what's going on, stuff like that.
I think she's in Chicago, but I know she was in New York for a while.
She was in New York, right?
Yeah. I always contribute a little bit to her Facebook fundraisers for Sisters in Cinema.
Yeah. Right.
And I've met her. I think I met her once. But yeah, I think we have her kind of on the list for someone to participate in a roundtable conversation. So, but I'll make sure of that, and maybe she could also be interviewed. That's a great point. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. And I mean, the exhibition's coming right up. It's opening April 15th, this year, but we will definitely keep you apprised. And I'm imagining that there might be kind of a sequel exhibition at some point. That's like, because this is sort of, it's really focused on like late 30s to 40s, 50s, 60s, a little bit 70s, a little bit less 80s, and maybe just like a touch into the 90s. So I think that if we did a sequel, it might start with the 80s and, and kind of take on the era of AIDS also. And, but also kind of think about like community and, all the kinds of ways that you were talking about. It's just, that would be great to kind of expand it beyond just like people. Like this sort of first exhibition is really focused on like kind of excavating this history of the center itself. But I think like thinking more broadly in like the kind of later decades of the 20th century and maybe into the 21st about Black queer art in Chicago, and kind of like in, there are many facets to explore. So so I think, if that happens, I'm sure someone at the center will be wanting to talk more with you. And I'm excited about that Art Institute exhibition also. So,
yeah, well, that sounds amazing. That's, I could see that being an ongoing, decade by decade even exhibition. So yeah, keep up the great work.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was so wonderful.
Incredible.
Oh, you guys are sweet. Well, thank you for this opportunity. Yeah, I wasn't sure I'd even have a lot to contribute because, as we get older, at that time we were doing that, we didn't think we were doing anything historic or memorable or earth-shattering, and it's only now that people are, this next generation is interested in the things that we did, and it's like, oh, we've become the Margaret Burroughs of, that time period, which is, super cool. But at the same time, I was telling one of my friends, it's not like we were taking notes and going, when I get interviewed in 2022, I want to remember to say this. It's like we were just freewheeling it, it was like, oh, let's do this, and now let's do that. And yeah. I know my friend Stephanie sent me a video of one of the events we had at the gallery. So if that's ever something you want to take a look at, we've got it. She also has a huge crate full of videos. This is just one that she happened to pull out, and the Art Institute digitized it for us. So
that's awesome.
Pretty neat to look back and see, see us meandering about.
Is that something is it in the exhibition or is it?
Yeah, I don't think it's part of the exhibition. I haven't seen I've just seen photos of the exhibition, but I wasn't aware that there was a video portion of it or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay. That's wow. That sounds exciting. That's an untapped resource.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So yeah, thank you so much. This has just been great, and we'll be in touch, in various ways.
Awesome. All right. Well,
All right.
you all enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.